So why don't we just take, 30 seconds and say hi, because not all of you know each other. So I'm Priscilla. You all know me. I'm here in San Diego. Thanks for showing up, guys. I've been so excited to talk about this book. So, yes. How about you, Becca?
I'm Becca. I'm here in San Diego, too. And I love everything Brene Brown. So when this book came out, I was like, barely even read like what it was about. I was just, yes, please. I know I'll need that. So.
Hi, I'm Rama. I live in New Jersey. I am a success coach for women trying to turn their side hustle hobby into a business. So I help them with systems, basically getting everything together. Again, I'm one of these Brene Brown people as well, but I have to say I find her books a little bit hard to read, and I prefer watching her on video. She's got a lot of YouTube material, and I find she's just more accessible that way. So I do find it hard to read her books, even though I know they're valuable. The concepts are always good, but wherever I can find it on video is easier to consume for me.
Nice. Yeah, she's really charismatic on video. I think that's
Absolutely.
her like go-to, fun or place to show up. So
definitely.
Thank you, Rama.
And Bettina.
Sorry, go ahead, Becca.
Oh no, I think Bettina was asking. What do I do? What am I?
Yes. Yeah, I was just like, what are you actually doing besides reading books?
Yeah, I just read books all day. No. I'm a mindful marketing strategist. So I help women entrepreneurs, usually who are more coaches, healers, seekers. I help them with their marketing strategy, but in a very aligned, true to who they are kind of way.
She's a total love muffin. She's just very yummy energy.
Happy to know you.
Yeah, so we're all here, conscious entrepreneurs. I kind of don't like that word, but we're here to help the world be a better place, lots of love and heart, and to lead. So I have no agenda or anything. I just want us to share and create a space for us to talk about. It could be something that you disagreed. It could be something that you're like, well, how do I apply it? Or something you like. So I'll just open it up. I have my own points, but I don't need to talk. I rather listen, so I can share later. Who'd like to maybe share?
And then Bettina, what was what did?
Oh yes, Bettina, tell them, what do you do? I know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm the German. Yeah, Priscilla and I have been working together for quite a long time. She's actually the reason why I left SAP.
And she's a totally different person now.
Yeah, we had hard conversations back in the day. And now I created my own business, and I basically took what I loved doing at SAP and market it now. So I do marketing and business strategy, as well as employee engagement programs.
Ooh.
So that work like with leadership and everything comes in really, really handy. So that's really cool.
Very cool.
Yes. And Bettina, one of her great talents is her ability to look at the big picture, but also the minutia. She's really good at asking all the questions to figure out, does this make sense? What are you missing? And if you want that person to go like, well, have you thought about this? Like she's the person. It'll drive me crazy at times, but it's great. Yeah. It's good after.
I think some of my clients don't like me sometimes.
But you're a lifesaver at the end of the day though. So it's really good.
And I'm like, you want it.
No. So who wants to go first? Anyone have anything burning to share? I know, Bettina, you were saying how you brought the book. Rama, when you joined, Bettina was saying how she brought the book, to her colleague, right? Or supervisor, manager. And she wasn't very open to the book. She's kind of like, no. And that could be something too. It's like, I guess this is a genuine question for me. I've always thought like, go where the doors are open, but then I guess you can ask yourself, is there a little gap or window somewhere where we can get in maybe through a back door to start opening up a conversation where maybe people are a little reluctant? I guess the question might be, where do you notice the spectrum of reluctance, fear, and a door is completely shut, they're not ready, go somewhere else? I wonder. So how do you feel about like in your situation, Bettina, like when someone is interested but maybe not ready, like
Yeah, I mean, that's also, it was funny because I just opened the book and it was about the like armored leadership. And I just feel like even in my own conversations with clients, I feel like, okay, if they can't perceive me, like I get like, I go back and I don't stay there with a open, you know, and I'm like, I go back into defense mode. So like what everything that Brené wrote, I'm like, okay, you know, like she also talks about that, you know, how we armor up and like hide behind so we don't get hurt and we don't show our vulnerability, that we don't know everything. And I mean, I sense that myself as well when in conversations I have, and I try to be open up because I was like, okay, they can't hurt me physically, you know. It's sometimes just this thought, okay, they may think I'm stupid or whatever, but they can't hurt me physically. And that actually helps me sometimes now to be a bit more open and actually stop trying to convince them. I just leave them where they are, and maybe then come back at another day and, you know, plant the seed. But it's just like, I feel, and I don't know if it's maybe also that time of the year that people are so closed right now. Like, I guess it's maybe also the amount of pressure people have, year end, etc. That's at least something I experience around SAP where I'm at. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I think that's really good noticing too, the like when you pose this idea to explore the book, like during a time when, like, I think right now people are overwhelmed. They're like, even if they would like to, it's almost like, you know, I know for myself, I'll shut down if I'm totally overwhelmed. I'm like, nope, not right now. Can't even look at that. So I think that's really good noticing that maybe it's timing, part of it.
Mm-hmm. And something that's been coming up for me, both in stuff I've been reading and also my own awareness, is that, like what Bettina said, is that sometimes it's the progression, right? It is a planting of the seed, you know, and letting that percolate in the person's mind, trusting that there is no timeline necessarily, there's no need to pressure, it's just a process of unfolding, perhaps. And then if they're ready, they'll be ready in their own time, and if they're not, then that's okay too, right? Not making it that significant, or like, you know, so we can only do so much, right? You can only take you can only take the horse to water, right? It still has to drink it itself, right? So we can take it, we can direct it to possibility, and then it's up to them to decide if they want it.
In my case, I think I don't really have the option for, the corporate type leadership situations anymore. So I don't have to like take it to a manager. Mm-hmm. In my case, a lot of this stuff is just that I get to look at how I lead in places that I lead. It's like in my company, but also, you know, in my business, but it's also, I run a monthly women's organization. So I have a leadership team, and it's just nice just to have some other places to think about how can I encourage them to bring all of their ideas and not feel like I have to control it. You know, and sometimes I think they do that. So it's like they look to me to be the leader, whereas I want to pull the leadership out of them so we can all kind of do it together. And it's just that encouraging them to be connected to their courage. I think people don't think about, like, so I like the beginning of the book, and I didn't get very far into it, I'll be honest, but at the beginning where she talks about people think of courage as something you have or you don't have. I thought that was pretty good. It's like, you know, but the fact that she breaks it down into all the different pieces where courage can be learned. And so I think that was just a good kind of mind, you know, reframe to look at that. And it's like, oh, maybe I can actually create situations where I can encourage people to be more courageous by teaching them that it's different, it's a skill set. And so if I can kind of model that, and then it will help other people do that. And I think that's how it's kind of, that's the biggest thing that I've got out of it so far, is that there's just ways that I can embody that. And it's just, I'm also in situations where we're mostly women these days. And I think women are more connected to their feelings, so they're more open to explore. And this also isn't like a corporate place where you're getting, you know, evaluated and your salary depends upon it and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's easier in my case to separate it out somewheres and just say, okay, it's okay. I can create a safe space for people to actually explore their feelings and bring all of themselves to whatever the conversation is. But I think it's definitely much harder in that corporate kind of place. I mean, I can't imagine where I would have been if somebody brought this to me when I was in that space, because I was just having this conversation with somebody yesterday that when I was in that space, you'd kind of put your mask on and you put your suit on, and only 10% of you goes to work, and the rest of you is all off doing other things somewhere, and you behave in that little sliver that they expect you to exist in. So I'm not sure if somebody had brought me the book at that point, I'd have gone like, I don't know, maybe I'd have been thrilled. Maybe I'd have been just, what do you mean? I have to bring more of me to work to this place? Because, it did not feel safe there to do that.
Yeah, I love what I definitely feel you on the, think back to my corporate world, and it was, I don't know if it would have been like, ooh, exciting because this is what I'm looking for, or like, ooh, can I do this here? Because
exactly.
Yeah, I think, that's probably why we all have left, right? Well, that's all why we've all left corporate. We're not there anymore because that was not
exactly.
I think we crave this. That's why we're all here reading this. But I also love what you said, Rama, about how you bring it to your leadership team. And I was, for me, I want to bring this type of, it almost feels like rules for engagement for like compassionate and brave, like community building, right? And so for me, I love it for courses I run, because they're very highly interactive and there's this community thing. And I think there's always room for improvement on getting others to show up and engage in the group. And I think this kind of framework can really, support that. I just don't know how yet, or, I think that we're probably all doing a little bit of some of these things and, with our groups, but I think there's even more you can put into play, to help other people share their voice, show up as leaders, find more courage to show up. Myself included, obviously. That's why I'm like, yes, I need this.
Yeah, there's more available.
Yeah. So anyway, for me, it's like, ooh, how can we do this for our clients and, group?
Yeah, it was interesting because I was just thinking, like, how do you get it to how do you weave it into your programs that you have, into the work you do, or into the way how you run your business? That's, to me, that whole it's so hard for me to say, vulnerability. It's a lot easier in German. At least one word. That's usually easier. That is so hard for me because I feel like always that my biggest fears like come up when you actually say like, oh, look, this is important to me. And I feel like especially when you're in a corporate surrounding, when you say like, that's an important value to me when I work, and I come in as a contract and I make that statement because it's important to me. I was like, I'm not working like that. I'm working like this. I don't function well if I don't do that style. And that's kind of like, it's hard to stand up sometimes to do that. And I feel like, okay, how can it get into more of a normal, to make it like, okay, yeah, it's normal to do that and to stand up for yourself and how you think and how you feel, rather than keeping it in, I can only say what they would like to hear. And I think that's a challenge. What is it that they can receive and hear? And what would they like to hear? Because I think it's good to challenge people and make them start thinking a bit different. But I don't know sometimes how to balance what can they hear with what do they want to hear without them shutting down. Do you guys know what I mean?
Yeah. In my case, I'm thinking in small pieces. Like if you give them a huge big concept and say, I want it to be, this way, they're going to freak out. Change in small bite-sized pieces. It's like, what's the smallest thing that you can do that is non-threatening, that you can do in a way that you get what you want without, I don't want to say ruffling feathers, but kind of like just to see how it's going to be received so that you can do it in a way that you still feel safe to keep taking the steps. That's, I think, what's coming to me for how I would probably have approached it. Just to say, okay, what's the smallest thing that I can do and see? And if that's received well, then okay, then what's the next bite-sized piece that I can do? So you're overall moving in the direction that you want. I was a consultant for 16 years as well in all these places. And so you're always the person that if there's a problem, they think they can switch you in and out easily. They can't do it so easily with the employees. And so I think in some ways it's I always certainly felt like I was in a space where I just need to keep my head down and kind of keep going and not draw too much attention, especially not for the wrong reasons. It's like if you're doing the right things, you're just kind of, you just keep going and everything's fine. But I feel like that's probably the strategy that I would have gone with, is just like the smallest thing that I can do that is going to move me in the direction and test the waters. And see about receptivity, and then keep moving, and then also see who I can enroll at my level who's also feeling the same way. So I mean, without going to management, is there a way that you could, I don't know, do a book club or whatever with your peers, and then you'd have support when you go to make those changes, when you present it to somebody else? Does that?
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of how I would probably have approached something like that at the time.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because I'm just like too much, too fast, too much in their face. so the little bite-sized pieces that's a good tip for me.
Yeah, and I think we all have personalities that are a certain way. It's like, there's no right way or wrong way, but I think it's just try it and see. Like, so if that's completely not who you are, that's fine too. But if it was me, that's probably how I would have approached it in that situation.
Can I add something to that? Because I've seen a lot of parallels around vulnerability, around partnership, especially for me as a newlywed, that I can share a little bit. But for me, Bettina, to add on to what Rama said, is I have found, using the example of my relationship with my husband, hard to say that without almost like going, is that I try to come from a place of curiosity, right? Because I have found that when I feel this need to make it really serious, or it has to happen, or this is the way, if it doesn't go like this, the whole world is going to collapse, right? If I come from a place of curiosity first, so it's a little bit more neutral. And second, if I ask a question, it can be a non-threatening question of, I have some ideas that I think could really contribute here. I've seen X, Y, Z. Are you open to hearing them? So it can be something that's maybe not as threatening, and I find that just putting the question on the other person, and of course they can say, no, I'm really busy. Okay, well, is there an interest in exploring this? Yes, but I can't see the time. Okay, then just kind of saying, well, if we made a little bit of time, or this time, would you be open to that? Okay, so kind of drilling from a curious place, not from a imposing, demanding, it's urgent, the world will end if we don't do it kind of place. I think because then it goes back to putting it on them to decide, and allowing them to give you the information versus us imposing what we think is best, right? So it becomes this collaborative give and take versus, look, this is going to be really important. Our leadership sucks. We've got to do something. Can somebody please just stand up and make an appointment? Because that is honestly how I would want to just say it, but it doesn't usually work that way, right? So coming from a place of curiosity, that feels there's a lightness to it, I think because then the word that is coming up is buy-in, right? They're buying into the process along the way versus you not you, the figurative you trying to impose something on them without them being on board, even if it's like Rama said, baby steps. Bettina, does that make sense what I said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
It's
hard, but it makes sense.
Well, I guess, I mean, I get it, because it can be a shift in our way of showing up, right? Yeah. But this is where the daring to be vulnerable, daring to ask the question, daring to not know, can be easier, I find, ultimately, though, than trying to push something. Because, doing the same thing, expecting a different result is kind of insanity, right? And so it's just being curious. Okay, well, and it goes back to priority, right? Do we want to be right? Do we want to be armored? Or do we want to create a different result? Right? And so I always have to come back to, what is my greatest priority here? Is it to be happy, or is it to be right? Is it for us to work together, or is it for me to just tell them how it is and let's just get the fuck on with it, right? And so it just comes down to, how do I want to show up? How do I want to create this experience? And who do I have to be to create that? That's what I have to think about in my relationship. And I've seen so many changes just by me changing some simple energetics of how I approach things. And even in asking, or just presenting, for example, if something doesn't feel safe, I have something to share, I don't feel safe. Are you available to help me? Are you available to create a safe space for me to share? Again, so then it's kind of like creates a space where they can meet you where they are in a way, which is, I have found to be very helpful. And it's less hard once you've had the courage to ask the difficult question or the more, vulnerable question. So that's my 2 cents. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? I've got plenty to say, but I'd rather not.
Reminds me a little bit of the enrollment conversation. It's like you try and get your client to have small yeses on the way to the big yes, right? With the big ask. So you're kind of, to me, it feels a little bit like creating that buy-in, but also baby steps towards it. That is what it comes down to. But I think it's just that gauging where they are along the way and where their sticking point is going to be. And then, once they start getting to a place of uncomfortable, then it's okay, that's the place you stay, rather than, making them more uncomfortable. It's like, let's deal with the small piece that I can see I'm making you uncomfortable with what it is I'm saying now, because I'm opening up, maybe bringing my feelings to work where they don't expect that, and then asking them to see that and deal with that is enough for them today. Maybe they're going to go home and go, oh my God, you never, whatever. They'll just get over it, and so will I. But you're just trying to do just that little bit to see where their edges are of discomfort, so that they can maybe grow there too. And like maybe the next time you do it, they'll go a little bit further. But it's just trying to do it in a way that you're enrolling them in doing it together. Like it's a collaboration. It's not just you spilling all over them, right? Does that?
Oh yeah, it's funny because I was just looking, I even have notes that a lot of this could be almost a framework for copywriting. So much of it is already embedded in the way I think heart-centered folks are doing copywriting. It's like really leading with the empathy piece. And I think that piece of like getting curious and really like checking in with them and asking about their, and I love the part too. I even took notes on this one too, when I was thinking like empathy and copywriting is so where it's at, is I may not have had the same experience as you, but I know this struggle. You're not alone. I mean, that's kind of like the leading, like that's everybody's copywriting, like, hook, right?
Good. Yes.
I was like, clever. But yeah, it's really like the curiosity piece to me is like we were saying in enrollment calls too, is that not only does it support us, but I think it supports them, it's both ways, but it supports them and like they get to be seen. And I think that's the gist of so much, is when you get curious, they get to share, in little bite-sized pieces, if they're willing, to share a little bit of them. So I think that's like really powerful.
It does make you wonder how this would be received by men as well. It's like we're 4 women here discussing a woman's book about feelings, right? And we're more open to that, and we're probably in the coachy kind of space anyway, right? Where that's what we do all day long, and even we're struggling to describe what's going on in here, But it's kind of like this is what we do, but she puts language around it that's just clear. That sometimes you do what you do, but you can't always describe why or how you do what you do or what the magic is that happens. But she breaks it all down into, steps of things that you thought, it's like, okay, sometimes it just doesn't seem like it can be broken down, but she does. That always amazes me. But I am curious as to see how this would be received in like a corporate or more male dominant patriarchal kind of environment. I would just be curious to see what that was like.
Yeah, she has some later in the book. I'm not through the whole thing either, but later in the book, she talks about some case studies like in the military. I don't know if you got to those parts. And I
didn't yet.
Yeah, so that part I was intrigued by, of course, because I was like, whoa, this work in the military seems like, a tough one to bring to them. So it was kind of fascinating to hear that.
Yeah, that story from the military, I won't share, I guess, but, if I can, I'd like to just mention the empathy piece, because I think that, one of the things that she says early on in bold is people, 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 right? How she too put others on a pedestal, remembering that her high-powered attorney friend is a person who has struggles. And I think this book is really about remembering how human, compassion for the human condition, that we're all doing the best we can, give or take some crazy people. And so how can we come from that human space? And I think empathy is a huge part of it. It has transformed even more so how I communicate, especially at home, because there can be that way where we think we know best, or we're trying to fix something or to avoid conflict, or whatever the impulse can be sometimes in relationship. It can be challenging also, whether it be at work or at home, when someone does something that we don't like, right? So we try to squash it, fix it, manipulate it, control it, whatever. And then what if we just sat down and held space to get to know what the person is going through, without trying to do anything, without any agenda? I wrote a post on Facebook about it. I called it just active listening. It's just listen. You ask a question. And I think that comes from that understanding that the person is whole, they're resilient, they're resourceful, they'll figure it out. We just need to hold the space and trust that they will come back to themselves just by giving them a space to be heard, I think it's here. Maybe, I don't know, she gives us some questions to ask, or tell me more about that, or how can I help, without any imposed agenda to try to fix something. And maybe there is a time to fix something. But oftentimes, I think when we're hurting, or when there's like the military situation, you got to ask the question from a place of you're in there with them. You're not above them. You're not underneath them. You're together, in it together, right? To come to a common solution. And I think that can be very empowering, to listen, really, truly listen. Because then people want to be seen and heard. We all want to be seen and heard, but are we giving that in return?
I actually wonder sometimes if we don't want to listen because we're afraid what we will hear, because maybe we don't have the answer. Like, because we're so I don't know if I speak for everyone, but we're all of us are somewhat solution oriented. It's like, okay, I'll fix you, and you and your problem. so at least like what I experience, like sometimes it's like, I want to know all the details, because then I can consult you through the way out there, instead of just saying, okay, just tell me, we'll figure it out. But I think that's a lot of times why we don't ask. It's not the fact that we're not interested. It's more that we're scared of what we'll hear, and that we may not have the solution for it, or and then what implication is that for us?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where she talks about the rumblings, right, Becca? Let's get into a space and let's work through it together. I think that's part of it too, is that nobody here needs to have all the answers. We get to work it out together in real time. And I think that's really huge. And that's a real point, Bettina. I've had that too, in my relationship. He's like, oh crap, whenever you're afraid to tell me something, it really is hard to hear, right? But he just listens. And then we just sometimes just being heard, we can resolve it alone. Like, it takes the charge off, right? And it's okay if we don't know. I think just taking the pressure off of ourselves to feel like we have to do or fix something creates so much possibility and just so much space, right? You go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that real curious listening, that true not to fix, just to listen, can be almost even more powerful than coming up with a solution for somebody. Because oftentimes in the getting curious, in the asking questions, in the listening, the person on the other end is getting that chance to explore things that they hadn't been able to in their own head. They're all stuck in there and going in circles. But once they have you to just dialogue with and get curious and maybe hear some little, further questions, lets them come to their own answers, which is usually the most powerful piece, you know? So
absolutely,
versus us coming to like, I got the answer for you. And it almost feels, it disempowers somebody by giving them the answer, because maybe they already had it and they just couldn't formulate it yet, you know? So I think that curiosity piece and just giving people space and time is really super powerful.
And that's the premise of coaching, right? Yeah. Ask powerful questions so people can tap into their own wisdom and reveal their own answers. Their own wisdom. Yeah, because I think many of us fall into the strategist, right? Like, okay, we're being hired to come up with this solution.
Yeah, well, I think that's what we all do here too, right?
Right. Yeah. And how do we remind people, oh, set it up. Yes, I can guide you and help you and have suggestions and all of that. And let's not forget, you've got some really juicy stuff in there. So can we get that out too as part of the process, you know? Because people just, and then it sticks because it's their own stuff. We're not trying to put something in their head, right? We've all been there. We know what it's like on both sides, I'm sure, you know?
Absolutely.
So it's a good reminder. And the other one, I caught myself using this one yesterday, where she uses like when we beat up on ourselves, when we like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I failed, or when we start to make up stories. I think she uses that part where she says, the story I'm making up right now is, right? So it creates that disassociation between I am wrong and I have a thought that is not empowering. So I caught myself yesterday to tell Alex, the story I am telling myself currently is blah, blah, blah. So that there can be some space to go, oh, okay, that's what I'm doing. I'm not bad. I just have some thoughts that are not really great,
That's funny because on that piece, like, when she talks about the difference between like shame and guilt, which is, work from her earlier books, and I've known it, conceptualized it. But of course, I think I need to hear it a trillion different times in different ways to like put it into place in my life. And like what you were saying reminds me of Saturday, I was out with my daughter and we were having an amazing day. And then we got to the end of the day and she did something that wasn't awesome, and I, called her out on it. And I was like, hey, that, and whatever, went through it. And so then she started to get so like guilty, shameful really about it. She was like, I ruined the whole day. I'm a bad person, and going through that whole thing. And so it was cool to be able to break out the talk with her about the difference between doing something crappy and feeling bad about the thing you did versus feeling like you're a bad person because of the thing, and I was trying, explaining that like, yeah, that's something you did that wasn't great. You might feel guilty about it. And like, you learn from it and we don't do it again, or, and that's okay, but you're not a bad person. It's like that difference that I was able to put words to it felt so empowering. And I think it just gave her a like, it was really cool.
How old is your daughter?
11.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's like, and she already has a lot of the tools to be able to express, she has an amazing school where they teach a lot of social emotional, development. So she already has been taught to communicate like that. But it was one of those, like, I've known that, but I've never been able to put it to words in my parenting. So it was cool.
Cool.
Yeah. I was like,
I think I always try and separate in a similar way the choices that she's making versus who she is. So it's like, well, is that a good choice?
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I didn't make a good choice, which is different from, like, say, being bad. So
I'm like, try again. It's okay. Exactly. We fail all the time.
Yeah,
right. That was
Rana
good.
has a daughter too. How old is your?
She's 8.5.
Already? I
know,
she was like 4 or 5 or something. How did that happen? And I forget her name.
I ask myself the same every day.
And her name again is?
Mackenzie.
Mackenzie, that's what
Oh my gosh, my daughter is McKenna.
Oh, that's
small
great.
world, right?
It is.
Yes, Bettina and I are childless, right? You're still childless, right? Bettina, you didn't adopt anyone along the way. Okay, good.
Stuck in.
No. Good. Anything else? I think for me too, what this book, I think, takes the pressure off is that we're all kind of doing the best we can. We're all leaders in a way. We're all human. And there is no right or wrong way. There is no formula. There is no whatever we've made up about leadership. It's just, and that we all can learn, like you were saying, Rama, ways to get better, and that we can navigate this landscape of leadership in a way that that's really helpful for us to show up more powerfully, right? And the tough conversations is a big part of it. From the boundaries piece, it's always, because I've always been so averse to conflict. I just my entire body, like I will probably eat soap before I have to go and have a difficult conversation. And that's where the power lies, right? And the leadership is being willing. I've been watching on Netflix this show, The Designated Survivor.
Yeah.
With Kiefer Sutherland, and he survives this Capitol bombing and becomes the president of the United States. And of course, it's all made up and whatever, but you see like the tough conversations he has to have all the time. And it's just been like, oh, could be an idea of what leadership is. It's just, showing up. And like she says, being clear is kind, isn't it? Like being clear is kind. Yeah, right?
It's funny because I'm like, that's my number one value, like kindness, right? But then when I saw that, it made me like wince a little bit, because I'm probably, the boundaries piece, when I'm not clear enough. I even think that with clients, right? I'm like, if I'm more clear about my boundaries, that's so refreshing to them to just know, like what I can and can't, it's like, ooh, that's something I need to look at a little more, is being more clear.
The nice thing I got out of this also was just that leadership doesn't look perfect. And I think a lot of the time it's like you expect your leaders to have the answers. You expect your leaders to get it right.
Yeah.
And if that's your view of leadership, it affects how you show up as a leader, because you sort of expect that, well, I can't call myself a leader until I've got it right, or I can't call myself a leader until I've perfected it. And I think it's really just opened up my, it's not that I didn't know, but the experience of is like, oh, it actually kind of relieves some of that pressure in how you show up. And I can kind of call myself a leader like now, rather than having to become someone I'm not to be, before I can wear the leader hat. Does that make sense? So it's kind of just opened up that space of, being the leader is almost like holding the container so that those difficult, horrible conversations can happen, the tricky ones, the growth ones, but you've got to hold the container so the conversation can happen. And it doesn't matter where it's not a hierarchical thing. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not my manager's the job to hold the container. It's like, if I need the container held, then I get to step into my leadership to hold the container for this conversation. So it kind of just, blurs the lines a little bit about who a leader is and what leadership is. So
I love that piece too, because I truly believe we're all leaders, but we don't feel like we are, because like you were saying, we have this old view of it, like, oh, you are if you've made it here and you're perfect at it or whatever, and it's like making it more accessible to every single person, no matter what. Like if you're a leader as, in your parenting role, or you're a leader in your whatever, like that one thing in your life even, like, I think that's so empowering for if all of us could start owning it and seeing ourselves as leaders. I think this is very helpful. It's that goes back to the humanity piece, right? We're all human. We don't have it all figured out.
Exactly. Yeah, that was helpful. Just broadening that kind of definition and taking the pressure off.
And redefining it, or exploring the definition for ourselves, right? Bettina got to experience this maybe a year or two ago, right? In the body of work that was given to me on soul leadership archetypes, leadership was defined as contribution. And there was something very kind of egalitarian about it, because we all contribute, right? The janitor, the president, the teacher, the mother, the husband, the whoever, right? Everyone and it's happening every day. It's like we're breathing, we're contributing, right? We're contributing here, we're contributing on the phone, we're contributing to the economy, we're in, to everything. And so it's like, wow. So that means that I get to define that for myself. What do I want it to look like? How, in what different arenas, and how is it going to shift, and what feels good? And so it's very freeing that, and she has a different definition of leadership here in the book, right? Of how, I think we get the best out of people. I think Tony Robbins in his leadership program talks about leadership as ways in which we get to influence others, have an influence on other people. And that's the thing too. We get to define what leadership looks like for us in a way that resonates, in a way that makes sense. And I think part of this, I am certain that part of these leadership conversations now, especially around conscious leadership, is around debunking that myth or those paradigms of what leadership is, whatever masculine or hierarchical or stuffy. We get to redefine all of that in a way that works for us, right? Because we're all feeling that call to show up, to say something, to do something, and questioning, right? And I think this is another part of what I love about the book. It's okay to have more questions than you have answers, and it's okay not to have the answers. The key is to start asking questions, or different questions. That is what brings, because like coaching, right? We get to mine the gold and invite people to mine the gold within themselves. And again, take the pressure off. Yes, there will be times when we need to stand up and have difficult conversations or call people out or blah, blah, blah. But we don't need to have all the answers, which is, I find, very exciting and liberating. At least until I start putting the pressure back on myself. But
it's ongoing. We'll be learning.
It is, right? It's an ongoing thing for all of us. And noticing, and the other thing too, I don't know if it was here or somewhere else, where I noticed that, sometimes I can feel like I'm making headway and progress, and I feel like I'm breaking some patterns. And then poof, I hit a ditch, and I'm like, went backwards, right? Okay, clearly not as far along as I thought. Okay, let's breathe and start again, right? And that's okay, just awareness, come back, start fresh. Beginner's mind, which is what Alex is a Buddhist, and so he gave me this book on Zen Buddhism, and it was talking about beginner's mind. And I think there's something really refreshing to come at it with fresh new eyes. Beginner's mind. Okay, how do I want to look at myself and leadership now?
Be willing to start again at any time we fall off. Begin again. I think that's resilience, it's motivation, that's, dedication. It's all those things. We get derailed though, you think, I blew it, or I wasted the time, or whatever that is. It's like,
fell off the wagon. I fell completely off the wagon last week, completely, like flat face on the mud. I was like, okay, new day, just start fresh.
Compassion with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, kindness, yes. And I will, Becca, I still want to hear all about your thing later, but and I think all of us do this, but I have finally begun to meditate, and I will have to say, just stopping the chatter can be incredibly liberating, just being still and creating space to hear something bigger than ourselves, in our icky thoughts sometimes. Having a practice, because it is a practice, right? It never, ever, ever ends, right? Every day we're practicing.
Yeah.
So I would advocate for that. But anything else? What's percolating? We have a few more minutes left. If anyone has anything else they want to share, or some insights or thoughts, or I don't know, anything.
Now, I was flipping through my book and seeing what I had, because I underline and I dog ear and all sorts of stuff. So
me too.
I was seeing if there's anything good in here I wanted to talk about.
Yes.
I think there's definitely some good stuff in here to explore, but I kind of feel like I wish I'd been further down it before I came to you guys. But we do the best we can. It's all good. But
and I haven't finished yet. I think there's still
Okay.
more.
And I'm going to read the book again because, man, this is like a freaking Bible. Oh, here's a funny one for us. We were talking about getting curious. She says here, get curious or get crazy. So that's another like one-liner. She says, when there's back and forth and stuff, she says, slow down, take a deep breath, and get curious about what's happening Instead, sometimes we bust out the armor, right, Bettina, which is what you're saying. It's like, And I think and part of it is the awareness of, okay, these are situations where I tend to bring up the armor. These are the edges, to use your word, Rama, where I'm like, not ready for that one. And
there was a section in the book, which I'm looking for, and I can't find it to save my life, where it was like, which one of these are, with shame or guilt, I think it was, like, which one of these do you normally go to, or what's your
I go to shame. I'm bad.
But it was like even more, I forgot where. Anyway, she broke it down really where, again, she's so good at putting to words concepts.
Yep.
I could not agree more. Go ahead, Rama.
I like one of the quotes that, I like the way she's got some of the pages, the really bold quotes. So one of them she's got is, when we have the courage to walk into our story and own it, we get to write the ending.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's just been a lot coming up for me lately, just in stories and how, I have some great stories to tell, things that I've created or I haven't, but I don't think anybody wants to know them. So I don't kind of own my piece in them or own my own value in them. It's just kind of like, you kind of brush it off because it's like my story. But then I've been listening to some speakers lately, and the good speakers are the ones that can really tell a good story. And I guess it's just this piece, her little caveat at the end of that was, when we don't own our stories of failure, setbacks, and hurt, they own us. And so it's just that whole idea of looking at those stories that we tell ourselves and owning them, having the courage to own them. And it's like, whether it's, shame or guilt or whatever it is just saying, well, that's who I was then. That's what I learned then. That's, that's what I knew. That's where it comes from. It doesn't really matter. But once you can own that, then you're kind of free from it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just sort of untangling yourself from these stories that we tell ourselves that, half the time aren't even true. It's just like, that's the story you told yourself then. Mm-hmm. And it's like, but I like the idea that she put on. It's like, but they own you if you don't write the ending. So it's like, how do you want to carry those stories going forward? If you have the courage to go in and own it, that can shift a lot. So I think that was really like this book, it felt like there's a lot of different places that it relieves pressure. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, I can let myself off that hook. Oh, I can let myself off this hook too. Oh, and this one. Yeah, it's like a relief. So that was just something else that kind of stood out. It's like, I didn't read all of the detail about it, but that was one that I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. So.
Mm-hmm.
Exhale.
Exactly.
More of that.
Yes,
right.
We'll have more of that. Bettina, anything percolating? You've been quiet.
No, I'm just listening, digesting. No, not really. It's they all hit. They are all on the spot, and I'm just trying to think. How can you incorporate it more without overwhelming yourself? And I think that's also what Rama said earlier, not only to take little steps with others, but also to take little steps by implementing it yourself before you get like, oh, freeze.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I want to go back because I really started reading this a few months ago and then put on pause a little bit. I want to go back and digest it again because I feel like there's some main pieces you can really dive into a little more deeply. Like I think the one I was thinking of that I just found was the idea of like empathy and practice. And it was talking about empathy misses, how you think you're being empathetic, but you're really being sympathetic, and how that creates, a wall with other people. And I was fascinated by it because basically it's like you'll recognize yourself in one or the other. Which one do you do more? And I love it. And maybe this is, a conversation for another call, I think would be really fun, is to kind of review this piece and figure out which is the one we do that we maybe want to be cautious of. But also on the other side, I love how she posed, which is the one that bugs you the most when people do, which is the one that causes the most distance between you and somebody, when they do it. And so it's interesting to see. And it's funny because they're not necessarily the same, So anyway, it's in, it's page 152 is where that is. So it'd be cool to explore that sometime. And the reason I like this one is because it's so, I think, powerful for us as coaches, or us in leading any groups, or it's cool. But there's so many more of those nuggets, right? Like that's just a few pages, but throughout this whole book, I feel like there's exploration of like, what does vulnerability look like, and all the other myths. And, I think that even digesting a few of them at a time would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of information. I feel almost like each one of these kind of, empathy misses is like putting on a new pair of glasses. Mm-hmm. It's like if I walk around in the world for a week, or a few days or whatever, and look at it through this sympathy versus empathy, and then, another time for a few days, it's like it's not something that you can just, oh, okay, I got it now.
I got it now.
It's like, yeah, it's like the next time you kind of, look at it in terms of, this, some of the other, the block and tackle or the boots and shovel kind of different ways. Like, okay, I'm going to put those glasses on today and just see how these situations, like, how do I do that, and how do I notice that? Because there's so many, like say she's so good at breaking these things down into ways I would never have thought of looking at something, in breaking it down that way. So
and it's so helpful when she breaks it down, because it gives me, because I'm super linear thinker, that it helps me like structure it in my head. Oh, that's a better way to respond than that, so right. I kind of like to see it that way. But the one thing the first thing that comes to mind when this whole like empathy misses is, we see it all the time when people are sharing on Facebook, something really heavy that happened for them, and we all have our comments of, how we're trying to like make them feel better or hold space or fix it, and so it's interesting because you can even see in other people's comments all the different misses, and my own misses. I think that's like the best place to look for like practice. Like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, no, that's good actually, because that's the thing. A lot of the time, is it about them or is it about you? Like, am I making it about me or am I making it about them?
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, it was
cool,
fun stuff.
Yeah, lots and lots in here.
I know. And she says here, agree to practice empathy, screw it up, circle back, clean it up, and try again. Mm. And I think that can be as simple as, I'm sorry, I'm can I try again, or something, like I have a very close friend whose grandma died last month, and then her dad died I think in May. And I just told her straight up, I said, I really want to support you. I really have no clue what to say or do to help you. I'm very sorry. Can you help me, just help you, because I don't know how. And she said, I appreciate that. I said, I really don't know, and so she helped me, help her, because I didn't know what to do. And instead of tiptoeing around, like, am I saying it right? Am I doing something right? Should I be doing? I just said, look, I don't know. Can we figure this out together? And it was so much easier. Sometimes just coming out and saying, look, I'm stuck. I don't know where to go. Can we rumble, right? Can we figure this out? Can you help me? It can be so much easier than feeling like we have to figure it out on our own, right? On our own.
I'm sorry, I have to run, ladies, for my next 1:00 call. But so nice to meet you all, and thanks for the discussion.
Yes.
Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.